Hi, I'm Brett Johnson, former United States most wanted cyber criminal, now good guy, or as the United States Secret Service called me, the original internet godfather. Now, how did I get that title? 39 felonies, a place on the United States most wanted list. I escaped from prison, and I built and ran the first organized cybercrime community. It was called Shadow Crew. It was a precursor of today's darknet and darknet markets. It laid the foundation for the way modern cybercrime channels operate today. Those 39 felonies had to do with refining modern financial cybercrime as we now know it. Account takeovers, credit card theft, phishing schemes, identity theft, stimulus fraud, tax return identity theft, you name it. I was on the ground floor of developing, refining, and implementing it. And let me tell you, yes, oh yes, that shit does get you sent to prison, deservedly so. Now look, there's a whole story behind all that we don't have time for today, because today, right now, it's time for the Brett Johnson Show. Today's episode, Common Sense for a Criminal World, when we come back. All right, so we are back to the Brett Johnson Show. Today's episode, Common Sense for a Criminal World. Now, before we get to that, there's some stuff we got to take care of. First of all, I'm not sure if anyone knew about it, but I am on Netflix. Yeah, you damn right I am. They gave this guy a platform more than just YouTube. They gave me a platform. Okay. Maybe they didn't give me a platform. Maybe I'm on this documentary series for a couple of episodes. Documentary series is called Web of Make-Believe. I'm on the 2 episodes that deal with the Stingray device. It's about Daniel Rigmaiden. Daniel Rigmaiden was an associate of mine who I taught how to commit crime. And then I set him up to get arrested for the crime that I taught him how to commit. Not the best point in my life, certainly not the best point in his life, but I tell you what, the show itself is absolutely outstanding. Please be sure to tune into that. What else? I was also on Sean Atwood's podcast just the other day. You guys should look it up. It's very good. It's kind of like the guests that he had on before I showed up were talking about Skinwalker Ranch and UFOs and stuff like that. So I guess just from my brief introduction to the show, I guess the show's a bit like Coast to Coast, but I came in there and I talked about my history a little bit and some cybersecurity, cybercrime issues. It was a very, very good conversation. So make sure you look that up. I am going to be back on Sean's show again. As I was finishing up, the producer reached out to me and she said, "We loved you. We want you back." And I was like, hell, I can't wait to get back. Let's do this shit again. So I'm going to be back on there. Where else am I going to be? Guess what? This guy. Yeah, right here. This guy. I'm going to be talking to Megyn Kelly. Megyn Kelly, the scheduled date for that is right now, July 19th. So a little bit over a month away. So please be sure to tune into that. Megyn Kelly is a great interviewer, so please be sure to tune into that. I think we're going to have a lot of fun. It's going to be a very good conversation about some of my history, cybersecurity issues today, things like that. Also, I'm also in talks to host a show, a television show for a channel. We're not going to discuss the channel or what the show's about yet, but we're in the preliminary talks for that. So hopefully that shit gets off the ground. We'll see. We will see. But in the meantime, please tune in to the Netflix series. It's called Web of Make-Believe, and I'm on both the Stingray episodes there. Those 2 episodes are about, like I said, they're about Daniel Rigmaiden, but I have a pretty good and a pretty fun part of that. So please tune into that. Now, questions from our viewers. First question, I get this a lot. I get a lot. It's not really a question, but I get a lot of comments about my past relationships, especially about the stripper girlfriend / fiance that I had. I don't even know how to approach this. I was an asshole when I was a criminal, when I was committing criminal acts. I truly was. I was not a very good person. I only cared about myself and what I could do to make me happy. And I didn't care about the fate or the harm that I caused anyone else. Over the years, I've been given the opportunity to turn that around, to actually consider my actions face the consequences of my actions and try to be a better person than I used to be. And I think I'm making that journey fairly well. I get several comments in the several people commenting in the comment section on YouTube and on whatever podcast that I'm on, or on Twitter and things like that, that they really appreciate my honesty. I also get a lot of people that, because of the way that I tell my story, that they consider this woman that I was engaged to at one point to either be a gold digger or someone that loved me. And I fed into that. The thing is that when I started speaking, I've been doing this legal thing now for, 5-6 years, maybe longer, since about 2016, I think, maybe 2015. All right. But it's when I really dedicated myself to, I am not going to break the law anymore. Now, when I first started speaking, the way that I approached that subject was I made a lot of fun of it. I made it humorous. I talked about how I was married for 9 years, how I lied to my wife for every day of those 9 years. It took her 3 years to find out what I did for a living. The next 6 years were me saying, I've stopped, I'm going to stop, I will stop just a little while longer, until finally it became me telling her, hey, you like spending the money, don't you? And at that point, that was the next 6 years, me saying that. And she finally understands that I'm not about to stop. And she leaves me. And that fear that I have of being abandoned becomes real. I go through a deep depression, get suicidal, figure I needed to do something about that, pick up the phone book, go to the Yellow Pages, go to psychology, go to criminal psychology, because I figure I needed that. Call the psychologist crying and tell her everything. And she tells me, hey, come in now. And I did. And I saw this psychologist for about 4 months. Really thought she was trying to do some good. She tries to get me to stop breaking the law and to go into real estate. And my question was, is there a difference? So I made fun of it. And I go on to say I used to say in my speeches that what happens is one night I got lonely and I got horny, and I had never been to a strip club before. So I decided, hell, why not? And I am that guy. I'm literally that guy that falls in love with the first stripper that he sees. And when I used to tell it that way, and I still tell it that way to a degree, but when I used to tell it that way, the audience, they'd, oh, funny, ha ha, he, and I would let it lay like that. I would paint that picture where she was more of a gold digger than it being a relationship. The reason I did that is because of the pain involved in really facing the consequences of my actions. And I really didn't start to do that for years until I got on Lex Fridman's show. And I watched the part where it's on his episode. And I think he cuts out that one section where he asks me about that. And I paused for a second and I said out loud, I said, well, fuck it, let's do it. And at that point, I started talking seriously about that relationship. And I've done that since that point in time. My fault completely that I did not paint a completely full picture of that. Now, the reason I bring all this up, and here's the thing, Elizabeth and I got engaged. We were set to be married 3 weeks before I was arrested, and she had no idea what I did for a living, none at all. So, and she had expensive taste. Make no mistake about that. She had the stripper taste. So as I told that on Lex Fridman, I've had a lot of people comment on his show, comment section, also on my show about that, anything from she really loved you to, dude, it was, she was a gold digger, everything else. I would say, well, I won't say any of that. I've started being honest and open about that since that point. Now, here's the reason I'm bringing this shit up. The reason I'm bringing this shit up is, I don't know, it's been a week or so, maybe a little bit longer. I wake up one morning and I've got an email from Elizabeth. And she says, it was a very short email. She said, I only recently heard what you were saying about us. And I don't even know what to say about you trying to say that I was a gold digger. I really loved you. And that was the end of the email. So needless to say, that took me back a bit. I did respond and I said, hey, because someone had sent me a picture showing that she was very happy now. And that always concerned me. I've lived my entire life since that relationship ended. I'd lived my entire life concerned, not because I was, madly in love with the girl still, but because I was concerned that I had destroyed her life, and I did not want to do that. I was naive. I've always had that naivete when it comes to relationships, and at this point I was the guy who thinks, well, I am responsible for destroying someone's life. And I never knew any different until I spoke about it on Friedman. Someone contacts me and sends me a picture, lets me know that, hey, she's good to go. And then she contacts me and tells me, hey, I'm surprised you would say that about us. Well, I apologized, and I told her I was very happy that she was happy. And I am. It was like a weight that was lifted off of me. And I am a much happier person now, knowing that I did not do that. Like I said, I'm naive. I'm the idiot that thinks, first I thought I could fix somebody. And then I thought, hey, for years I thought I'd been responsible for destroying someone. And I don't think any human being is really responsible for destroying anybody. I mean, I think you can, but I don't think I did that. I'm glad to know that I didn't, that I was just naive on that. Moving right along, I had a viewer commenting on Lex Friedman's episode where I was on 272. She asked me, she's like, I would love to know what Brett's opinion is on Johnny Depp and Amber Heard if he watched the trial. Well, I did. Not all of it, because I had better shit to do, but I watched a good portion of it. And I got a lot of the little short videos on TikTok and things like that. My view of that, I really think that Johnny Depp went into that courtroom being Johnny Depp. I'm sure that maybe some lawyer somewhere told him, hey, you need to make sure you're presentable, professional. You need to put on these, this fake face so that the jury doesn't know who you are. And I think that Johnny Depp probably said, fuck that. I'm going to go in and be me. And he did. Every single thing that he talked about, that he did, everything else, even when he was listening to the testimony, I truly believe that was Johnny Depp. We saw him as he is. Amber Heard, I don't think that she did not come off as being a truthful person. That doesn't mean that I don't think she told the truth on some things. I certainly do, but I don't think that I think that her demeanor, her actions in court, the way that she dressed, even her testimony, the way she talked and was talking to the audience, the jury and the judge, and every single aspect of that, I think, was controlled by some outside person saying, hey, you need to act like this, you need to dress like this is the way you need to say this. And they tried to manipulate every single thing across the way. And I think the end result was that Amber Heard did not come across as authentic whatsoever. I think that both individuals, do I think that Johnny Depp is a control freak? I absolutely do, but I can absolutely understand that as well. You take somebody that his life is acting, being that public figure, and then he's surrounded by people that are looking to make money from him. Agents, producers, employees, everything else. Yes, you get to the point where you're like, screw this, I've got to take control of shit myself, and you become that control freak. I understand that. Do I think he abused her? I do not know. I do not know. I don't. I think they both abused each other. I think it was a very toxic relationship. I think that the judge was absolutely correct in the decision. I think the jury was absolutely correct in the decision. That's my thought on Johnny Depp, Amber Heard. I truly hope that Mr. Depp is able to resume his acting career. I have enjoyed countless films that he's in. As a matter of fact, I like Amber Heard. That movie with Nick Cage, Drive Angry, I love the shit out of that movie. So I would like to see her continue acting as well. I don't think that it's interesting to me that we live in a society that if you disagree with someone, if you can't pick a middle ground. you either are for or against. There are no gray areas. And I think that with this case here, I think that yes, there are. Both people were very abusive to each other. It was an extremely toxic relationship. I think you can hit that middle ground, and that's a lot of some of what we're talking about today. This aspect of common sense. Seems like there's no common sense anymore with the criminals, with the good guys, with the viewers, with anybody across the planet. So we're going to talk about that some today, and we'll get to that. Ha! I had another viewer that was, he listened to me talk about trust in the criminal environment. So if you think about it, for a criminal to victimize you or your company, and I've talked about this before on other episodes, but for a criminal to victimize you or your company, that criminal has to establish a degree of trust to get you to give them information, access, data, or cash. If you don't trust that criminal, you ain't going to give them shit. So that criminal has to establish trust with you. So how does a criminal do that? Well, a criminal does that through a combination of technology, tools, social engineering. We inherently trust the technology which is given to us, our cell phones, our laptops, desktops, things like that. We also we trust the news that comes across the line. We trust the phone numbers that show up on caller ID. We trust the device to tell us when to go to meetings or which way to go to a store or to a different state or where have you. So we trust the devices. What we don't understand is that criminals use a variety of tools to manipulate that technology. They use a spoofed phone call. So you don't see the phone number they're calling from. You see the phone number of your financial institution, the IRS, the FBI, where have you. They use proxy addresses so that while they may be located in Africa or maybe New York or Florida, they can make it appear that they're in the EU, the UK, South America, California, wherever they want to make it appear. That tends to lay a base level of trust. And then we see, once the base level is laid, we see how good of a con man, a liar, a social engineer that criminal is in manipulating you to give him or her information, access, data, or cash. Okay, so that's the way that trust works on that end. But trust goes further with criminals, because a criminal online never works alone. It is never a single attacker. He has to network with other people. He has to buy his products or services. If he's committing some sort of financial fraud, it often or almost always involves a degree of identity theft. He has to buy PII from someone or credit card details from someone, or he has to buy the SOX 5 proxies, the proxy addresses or the spoofed phone software from someone. Okay. Or if he's doing ransomware, he has to buy the ransomware from someone. To do that, you have to be able to trust that person. Also, you have to be able, if you're running money mules, you have to be able to trust those people to cash out. You have to trust everyone within your criminal circle that you're committing these crimes with, because you have to network together to be successful in cybercrime. So there has to be trust there. So this individual was listening to my show, said they liked it. I appreciate that. But they also asked, okay, so knowing that, how do you disrupt that? Is there a way to destroy that? And I think there is. I truly do. I'll be talking more and more about stuff like that as we continue this series, this show, the Brett Johnson Show. But long story short, what I think you can do, if you look at some of the major arrests that have happened, okay, so you get back in 2017, you had Alexander Kazaa that was arrested. He ran Alphabay. Alphabay was shut down. At the same time that Alphabay was shut down, Hansa Market was seized as well. So what federal authorities did, or worldwide authorities, they shut down Alphabay. Then they don't tell anyone that they've seized Hansa Market, another dark web marketplace. They don't tell anyone that. Instead, they direct all those criminals over to Hansa Market, saying, hey, this is the new hot spot. Go over here. And like a flock of sheep, they do. So 2 weeks later, federal authorities announced, ha, we got you here too, suckers. The result of that is it caused so much paranoia within the dark web communities that a lot of those members refused to use the Tor browser for a while. They went up to Reddit. They started using Facebook groups. They went over and started looking for smaller and smaller encryption channels like Wicker or Telegram Today or Discord or WhatsApp or Signal, things like that. Okay. So you can disrupt that type of trust. You can sow enough paranoia and distrust in the entire community, hopefully, that criminals no longer know who to talk to, who to trust, who to work with, anything else like that. I think there are ways to do that. And as the show goes on, I'll continue to talk about stuff like that. I'll do a show on that at some point. Okay. But I just wanted to answer that kind of at that point. I had another individual yesterday that asked me, hey, this drug program in prison, tell me more about that. Well, dude, it's called cognitive behavioral therapy. I thought it was all about, rehabbing on drug use, and I was not a druggie, but it turns out that it's a 9-month course in federal prison, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 9 months. You're in your own unit, your own barracks rather, and it's all peer-based. So every criminal, every inmate there looks at everyone else, and if they see you doing something wrong, they put your name on a list. The next morning, you get your ass up there in front of every other inmate. He calls you out, says what you're doing wrong, and you get to explain that in front of everyone. And then every inmate that wants to gives your ass feedback as the prison counselors are listening, and they give you feedback too. And it's all about getting you to accept responsibility, getting you to understand that your thoughts determine your feelings determine your actions. So there's this thing called cognitive dissonance. It's faulty thinking. As criminals, I used to think, well, I've got to do this. I've got to provide for my family, for my wife, for my stripper girlfriend, whatever the bullshit line was that I was saying. And at the same time, I would try to justify those actions. I would try to say that I was a good guy in the real world, a bad guy online, everything else. And this program is all about getting you to accept responsibility, to understand your thought processes and how that works, and to change that. If you change your thought patterns, your feelings will change, and then finally your actions will change at the end of the day. That program is open to anyone who has had drug use. So to get it in federal prison, you have to say that you're a druggie. I was addicted, and you have to be approved for it. Well, I was never addicted to any type of drugs. Hell, I didn't start drinking until I was 34. I lied to get the program, and it is honestly the best, most productive lie that I have ever told in my life. And I really think that it saved my life, and it really contributes to or helps me be the person that I am today. I'm extremely grateful that I went through the hell that I did for those 9 months. And there were points there when it was hell, when it was absolute hell. But I really believe it was worth it. And I really think that cognitive behavioral therapy, not just in the drug program, but overall, I think that not only inmates could benefit from that, but most people on the planet could benefit from some CBT. All right. So that being said, let's move along. I had a gentleman that asked me, this has been quite a few episodes ago, and I've never responded to that. And I've always meant to, so I'm going to respond to that today. He asked me, hey, can you give me some advice on how to live your life and what we need to do? And I said it on Lex Fridman. I'm going to say it again. And you notice if Lex Fridman's watching this, I'm not saying Lex Fridman anymore. I'm saying it like it's supposed to be. Lex Fridman. I said it on Lex Fridman, and I'll say it again here. I really think that there's two reasons that we are on this planet. The first reason is that we need to understand who we are, understand ourselves. Rene Descartes said that, know thyself. And I think that is fundamental to our existence on this planet. We need to know who we are. We need to understand ourselves. The second thing is we need to always understand that we need to help each other, not hurt each other. I think that's fundamental to our existence on this planet. If you're looking for something to do in life, what I would say is find something that makes you happy, that does good. And that can be any number of things. It can be any number of things, but find something that makes you happy. Don't go into a career simply because it's a high dollar career, because you are going to be miserable. You're always going to wonder about, well, I wish I would have done this. I wish I would have done that. And everyone in your circle is going to be miserable because you're miserable. So find something that makes you happy, that does good on this planet, work to help each other, and know who the hell you are. All right. That caused me to, I was thinking about that today, and between that and the RDAP, the drug program question that I got, thinking back on prison, and I said it on the prison episode, and I'll say it again. I saw people there that were serving life in prison, 30 years in prison. They had lost every single thing they had. They were never going to get out. They didn't have any visitors anymore. They had absolutely no connection whatsoever to the outside world. Their entire existence was in prison, behind the fence, behind the wall. And those individuals every single day would find a reason to be happy. You can sit there and cry if you want to. You can sit there and moan and wallow in self-pity, but most of these guys would find something every single day to not only occupy their time, but to have enjoyment. And that could be as simple as watching a NASCAR race or a ball game or working out or reading a book or just socializing with other people. But they would always find something to be positive about. And I think that's one of the things that we often miss in the outside world, is that we often just kind of wallow in our self-pity. We lament the lives that we've got instead of making the best of what we have. And I think that we really need to get past that. I remember this one guy, his name was Chief. And this has nothing to do with finding happiness, but this guy, Chief, he was a Yaqui Indian, and Chief probably went about 450 or 500 pounds. This man was so friggin' big that when he laid down on the bunk, you're given a single wide bunk. It's a little bit narrower than single. Actually, it's a lot narrower than single wide. But Chief was so big that he would not fit on the single wide. All right. And the reason that Chief was in prison, he was on the reservation. He had some mental problems. So one day he's raising hell at his house. A couple of reservation police show up at his place. They come knocking on the door. Chief comes out with a machete. Oh, yeah. Chief comes out with a machete, chops one of the fucking guys, the cop's arms off. So Chief gets sentenced to 7 years. And yes, you only get 7 years for that shit. That was not the only thing that Chief did. During the trial, because yes, Chief decided to take that shit to trial and not plead guilty. During the trial, they've got the cop on the stand talking about what happened, and the cop is just crying because the cop's not got an arm anymore. So the cop's just crying. Chief is back there, listening to it. Chief stands up in the middle of the cop's testimony. Chief stands up and he starts screaming, "Hey man, I did you a fucking favor. You've got retirement for life now." He only got 7 years for that shit. Now, the reason I bring up Chief is because Chief was, believe it or not, Chief was a good guy. He was behind the fence. He was a good guy, but he had some issues. He had some mental problems. It turns out that when Ronald Reagan was president, that Ronald Reagan signed a bill that basically shut down a lot of the mental health services and facilities that would usually take care of Chief and people like Chief. So as a result, you get a lot of people behind bars that have mental problems. And Chief was one of these people. So Chief, I got there when Chief had probably 18, 20 months left on his sentence. As they cut him loose, and yeah, they cut him loose, Chief is released to a halfway house. Now, the halfway house could only keep Chief for about 6 months, and Chief had a lot of issues. I don't know whatever happened to that guy, but the reason I bring that up is this thing of mental issues in prison, people being released, not being able to get the services that they need, and then the way that society handles that. Honestly, you want to know, other than just telling the story about Chief, because I started to think about him, other than telling the story about Chief, I really liked the guy. I really hope that he ended up all right. I'm not confident at all that he did, but I just wanted to tell that story about the man. I think it's important to talk about some of these people that were in prison. I served time with this guy named Toby. He was a Hispanic guy. He was arrested in Houston, and he had served 30 years. He had went in when he was like 19, had served 30 years, and was getting ready to get his ass out. And Toby had no concept at all about what being a free person was, about what life was outside. And they were cutting this guy loose without any preparation at all. And Toby again, he had a lot of mental problems. He was quick to anger. He always wanted to fight with people. But, at the same time, Toby was a good guy behind the fence. My concern is you let people like this out, and you have to let them out because you can't keep someone like that locked up. But we should have the infrastructure in place and the people in place to make sure that people like Chief, like Toby, like all these other, and I saw a lot of people like that when you're released, you're given the opportunity and the help that you need to succeed, because I'm not at all confident that people like Chief, people like Toby at all succeeded when they got out. And this, they were released before I got out in 2011. So I'm not sure whatever happened to them, but I'm not at all confident that anything positive happened to them. I talked earlier about, this episode is about common sense, and that had nothing to do with common. Well, maybe it does, right? If you're gonna put your people who have mental problems in prison and then just cut them loose on the street, maybe have some enough goddamn common sense to give them the ability to get a fresh start and to get the help that they need, instead of just cutting them loose on the street with no possibility of succeeding whatsoever, right? Maybe that's some common sense. I'll tell you some more common sense. So the CEO of Kraken comes out yesterday with, I guess, some sort of manifesto. And he says, hey, I'm tired of all the pronoun shit. I'm tired of everyone, all my employees calling everything racist. So I'm banning all of that because I believe in free speech. We've got an issue worldwide about not letting people live their lives. I don't really care if you're right wing or you're left wing. I don't really care which one you are, but we it seems like I say we, but it's not we. I think it's a select few people that really want to force their beliefs on other people. This is the way things should be. I'm going to require you to do this, whatever this is, whether it's right wing or left wing. All right. Conservative, liberal, libertarian, whatever. We want to force those beliefs on people. I really think that life would be a hell of a lot better if we just treated one another the way that we would like to be treated. That's easy to say. There was an old man in a book that said that once upon a time. He said it in a different way. He said, do unto others as you would want them to do unto you. He said it, and then they nailed him to a tree later on in the book. So I'm not sure how viable that thing is, but I do know that if we would live like that, let people do their own damn thing as long as they're not harming someone else. I think if we lived like that, it would be a hell of a lot better world. The reason I mentioned that, this Kraken CEO, I guess he was really upset a lot about the pronouns. He had evidently at one point he had a Slack conversation with the employees about pronouns, and the employees were going off the handle, and he closes down the Slack channel and everything else. The reason I said that is, in prison, we had transgender people. Believe it or not, we did, on the yard. Yeah, we had transgender. I actually served time with 3 while I was at Fort Worth Prison. That's where I served up my time, Fort Worth Federal Prison. And there were 3 there. There was a doctor who was like 70 years old. He was in for Medicare fraud. And once he gets behind the fence, he decides he wants to change his gender. So, yeah, there was that dude. There was another guy that was in the drug. There were 2 more that were in the drug program. One of the transgender people, they were a porn star. Yeah, they had the male equipment down below, and up above they had the breastises and everything else like that, and the long blonde hair and all that. And then there was another transgender person that in the drug program, a meth addict. And the interesting thing, one of the things that I've seen time and time again in prison is that, you would think that those transgender people in prison were looked down upon, attacked, beaten, everything else like that. And that was simply not the case. It wasn't. It was not the case. It turns out that most inmates did. I mean, did you look down on them? Well, you look down like they're a little odd sometimes because, you know, you're the only one on the yard that looks like a woman. So, yeah, you look down like they were a little odd. But you know what? There were times and times again that people broke bread with them all the time. They didn't attack them. They didn't talk bad about them. They didn't do anything else. As a matter of fact, when I was in the drug program, the meth addict that was transgender, we as inmates didn't have a problem with that person. But the counselors certainly did. As inmates, that person wanted us to refer to him as a her, and we did. We called him she. I mean, have you seen her? Have you seen her? Hey, where is she? And because we as inmates were doing that in the drug program, the counselors got upset about it. So the counselors put this inmate's name on the board one day to get up in front of all the other inmates. And they started hammering this person. Hey, you're a man, right? You're a man. You've got a penis. And they were saying this shit to this inmate. You've got a penis, right? Well, then why are you wanting us to call you a her? Why are you referring to yourself as a woman? And the inmate was trying to explain and everything else. And then they turned it over. Then the counselors turned it over to the inmates. All of the inmates that were in the audience. What do you guys think? Give this person some feedback. So we started standing up, basically saying, hey, we ain't got a fucking problem with it. If they want to be called a she, doesn't hurt us. I don't really give a shit. And the result was the counselors got mad at us. Oh, you people just don't understand. You people just don't understand. I don't think that's probably the case. I think that in prison, you get the understanding of, hey, let each motherfucker live their own lives as long as they ain't messing with you. I think that's the point. You know, as long as you're not hurting someone, why are you trying to change somebody's life or tell them how to live? I don't give a shit if you're transgender. I don't care. I don't care if you're gay. If you want me to call you a she, I'll probably do that. But you know what? If I mess up sometime and refer to you as a he, it's a mistake. You know what? I'm not. So what? So fucking what? I think that we should be allowed to live our lives the way we want to, as long as we're not causing harm to each other. We should respect each other. That's a novel concept. Respect each other. It turns out, you know, I think that we can live in that world where things are not just black and white, where we can have mutual respect of each other. I think that you can have the possibility of, I think that we can live in a world where we can say Donald Trump is an asshole and Joe Biden is incompetent. I don't think it has to be either or. I don't think it's black or white. I think that both things can exist in the world that we live in. I think that we can want to fill our cars up with gasoline and want a clean environment at the same time. I think that's possible. I really do. I think that, you know, I was in San Francisco for RSA, and I'll talk about RSA as we end the show. But I was in San Francisco for RSA at the same time that the election was going on, and they were talking about the potential of this DA, the San Francisco DA, being recalled because of all the crime that's been going on in San Francisco. And lo and behold, the DA got their asses recalled. Certainly did. The DA said the voters were like, hell no, that one's got to go. So the next day, I'm walking down the street from my hotel to the RSA convention. There's a woman in front of me. Two guys are approaching, and they're talking about the election and how good of a thing it was that the DA had been recalled. And this lady stops right dead in the middle of the street, just in the middle of the street, stops and starts screaming at the top of her lungs, fuck you, I hate you, I hope you die. And then she proceeds, as they continue to walk on, kind of trying to ignore her ass, she proceeds to tell them, anybody who thinks that recall was a good thing doesn't deserve a modicum of decency. And I was sitting there thinking the entire time, that just proves to me that this recall is obviously a good thing. The thing is that you cannot, you know, this, we had all that problems with George Floyd. And again, we can live in this world where it doesn't just have to be one way or another. All right. George Floyd was murdered by law enforcement. That does not mean that you have to get rid of all the cops that are all around. And it does not mean that you have to take it easy on crime. What it does mean is that you've got some damn cops out there that need to serve life in prison. And we need to get those son of a bitches off the street. It doesn't mean that every single cop is bad. It doesn't mean that law enforcement is bad. It doesn't mean that you don't need to arrest people. And this DA, I guess this DA came in, and they were not the least bit tough on crime. So you started to have all the shoplifting that was going on. You had the break-ins, everything else. And matter of fact, as I was leaving that night, I had dinner after I flew in, had dinner at a restaurant. It was about 10 p.m. and I was in a decent section of San Francisco, and I was about to leave for the night. And I was asked by everyone that was around me, "Hey, how are you getting back to the hotel?" And I was like, "It's a half mile away." And I was like, "Shit, I'm walking." 10 o'clock at night. And they paused and looked at me, and they were like, "You're walking?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm walking." And they were like, "Well, just make sure you walk with a group." And I'm sitting there looking like, seriously, you want me to walk with a group? And they were like, "Yeah." And I got back, I walked by myself, and I didn't have a freaking problem with that. But that idea that things are that unsafe bothered me. You have to have proper law enforcement in whatever area that you're in. If you don't have proper law enforcement and the laws that are there, and if you don't prosecute, let me tell you, criminals will take advantage of that. There's not a doubt in my mind. Look no further than Portland. You want an example of that? Look no further than Portland. The thing is that I've had more than one friend lately that have been to Portland. They've been like, "Hey, don't go. The entire downtown's boarded up. You've got crime out there. You've got homeless people out there. You've got, the open air drug markets. You've got all this other bullshit. Don't go." And I love Portland. I think Portland and that entire state is a beautiful state. You cannot allow that type of activity to continue. You've got to put the brakes on that shit. Same thing online. If you're letting criminals get away with cybercrime, they will continue to do that. It will overrun your system, your site. It will take advantage of every single thing that it possibly can, because believe it or not, you've got predators out there, and they will prey upon you if you let them. That's in the real world. It's in the online world. Now, moving right along. Before we get to, I'm going to talk about noir here in a minute. Was reading the other day about these judges that have been targeted. All right. Kavanaugh, evidently some guy comes up to his house. He's ready to kill the guy, kill Justice Kavanaugh, and he found his address online. We've seen judges targeted recently and murdered recently. There was a couple of years ago, a guy looks up a judge's address, goes to the judge's house. The person who answers the door is not the judge. It's the son of the judge, and that person gets murdered. I forgot, maybe 2 people were murdered for that. But there's an issue with crime and these judges being targeted. We live in a society these days where it looks like law enforcement and the justice system, judges, police officers, prosecutors, defense lawyers, things like that, are being targeted by people that are unhappy with the decisions that they're making. And they're able to often find their addresses online, or by doing a background check, doing some sort of been verified lookup or something like that, looking them up on White Pages Pro, People, Intellius, what have you, or pulling their data from a TLO or a Delve Point report. That's a problem. This idea of our information, I've talked about before how criminals use your information to steal your identity and commit financial crimes, but it goes further than that. Your information is available online to whoever wants it, And we're seeing now that criminals are pulling up the information of law enforcement officers, or they're sharing that information of where they live, their names, things like that. They're pulling up the information of judges, prosecutors, lawyers across the board to target those individuals. There's a bill in Congress now that's trying to make sure that those individuals are protected, that their information is not available. I support that bill 100%. It seems like people like Rand Paul, AOC, and a few others do not support that bill, but that bill absolutely needs to get passed, because we cannot have law enforcement officials targeted. We cannot have judges targeted, murdered, things like that. We need to have these people protected. I bring that up because other than that bill, we've got this Roe v. Wade decision that's coming down the pike, and they're going to turn over, like it or not, they're turning over Roe v. Wade, and at least 26 states are going to criminalize or ban abortion. You get a state like Louisiana is going to charge people for murder if they get an abortion. And I guess that's whether you get an abortion in Louisiana or if you travel outside of the state of Louisiana. The problem with that is, and if you want to know my opinion on abortion, it flips. Okay. I think that we should leave people alone as long as they're not harming each other. My opinion on abortion, I support Roe v. Wade. At the same time, I do not think that it's this common sense approach to shit. I do not think that, you need to be using an abortion as a means of birth control. And I don't think a lot of people do that. But, if you're one of these idiots that, is doing it as a means of birth control, fuck you. But other than that, I think that Roe v. Wade absolutely needs to be in place. I've got my stepson's got a friend right now. They're in Texas. The woman, the placenta, I guess there's something wrong with she's pregnant and the placenta is becoming poisoned or eating itself or some bullshit like that. And anyway, they've told the woman that, hey, the baby's going to die, period. But you are going to die if you don't get an abortion. The problem is that in Texas, you ain't going to get an abortion. So she has to, if she does, she can get an abortion, but she has to wait up until the point where it becomes life-threatening for her to get an abortion in Texas. So the doctors told her, hey, you need to leave the state to do this. There's something wrong with that. There is something wrong that we're instituting laws where for someone to get an abortion that's needed to save their lives, they have to wait until the point where it is life-threatening. As the doctors are even saying, oh yeah, this is going to happen. This will kill you. All right. This is what's going on in Texas. So they're actually going to travel outside of the state. The reason I bring that up is states are pulling. Now, I mentioned the judges that are being targeted, but I want you to understand the data problem that's out there. Okay. An individual can pull up the address of a law enforcement officer, of a judge, of a prosecutor, anything else, and then target that prosecutor. But we're also starting to see states that are banning abortion or criminalizing abortion. Those states are already pulling up the location data of people who are traveling to abortion clinics. Think about that for a second. So if you're in Louisiana and you want to get an abortion and you decide you're going to get one out of state, you travel to whatever state in that area or around that area is still doing abortions. Louisiana as a state is going to pull the location data, see that you've traveled to an abortion clinic, and guess what? Your ass is going to be charged from that point. There's something wrong with that. There's something horribly wrong with that. I don't think that really is a common sense approach to how to do things. End of the day, I fall back on that saying that I had earlier. It would be a much better world if we treated one another the way that we wanted to be treated. And it would be a much better world if we all lived our lives the way we wanted to, as long as we weren't hurting each other. And if you just let people do that, instead of trying to force your beliefs or your opinions on someone else, just leave each other the fuck alone, as long as they're not bothering anybody. Just saying, hey, this is a cybercrime podcast, believe it or not, a cybersecurity podcast. And so the reason I called it Common Sense is this character, this criminal on Telegram. So over the years, the definition of the dark web has changed. It used to apply only to the Tor browser and using the Tor browser to access these onion type sites. That was the dark web. But over the years, that idea of the dark web has changed. Sure, you've still got the Tor browser, but now you've got Discord, you've got Telegram, you've got some shit on Reddit, you've got Signal, you've got Wickr, you've got WhatsApp, you've got all these different communication channels, you've got Discord, all these different types of communication channels, not even talking about Facebook groups and, the surface websites and things like that. You've got all these different sites that criminals use, or apps that criminals use to communicate, share, exchange information, target victims, everything else. So that definition of the dark web has expanded over the years. The reason I say that is Telegram is it right now. Telegram has really taken over the idea of what used to happen on the forums on the dark web. All right. I mean, the numbers of users that are using, of criminals that are using Telegram to commit fraud continue to explode through the roof daily. And the real reason for that is there's a few reasons. Telegram is extremely easy to use. It's an app that works on your phone, on your browser. It's encrypted. It's very anti-law enforcement. So Telegram does not answer to U.S. courts whatsoever. The person who owns Telegram is also very anti-law enforcement. They're in Russia. They're not going to answer any subpoenas, anything else like that. They're not going to talk to law enforcement. It's very easy to use. There's very little friction. See, the Tor browser has a lot of friction. You've got to know how to use it. Not only does Tor have friction, but the only real viable communication channel on Telegram, Dread, which is the Reddit of Telegram, Dread has a lot of friction just to use the damn thing. You've got to get past these captchas from hell. Not only that, but at one point, the designer of Dread, a guy named Hugbunter, he removes the search function from Dread, which causes friction through the roof. Nobody wants to use that shit. At the same time, Hugbunter is not an unbiased player in criminal communities. He is very biased, meaning that if you pay the son of a bitch X amount of dollars, he's going to like you more than he likes anybody else. The result is a lot of friction for criminals, and it opened the door for services like Telegram to take over that type of environment. And Telegram is taking it over. All right. The reason I say that is the reason I bring up Telegram and talk about, the way the dark web has changed is the number one fraudster on Telegram was this gentleman named Noir. So Noir, and Noir ran refunding services. So I've talked about refunding services. I've not done a refunding fraud episode on this channel yet, but I've talked about refunding fraud for years now. I'm the first person that really talked about it to the victims. I was a guy that several years ago started warning about refunding fraud, and nobody listened to me. They were all like, it's fine. It's just hitting Amazon. It'll never hit us. Fast forward to last year and this year, and all these friggin' merchants across the planet are scared to death of refunding fraud because they're all getting eaten alive by it. As a matter of fact, I'm traveling next week to Cleveland to the NRF conference where I'm giving a keynote on refunding fraud, because everybody's getting eaten alive with it today because nobody listened to me back when I was complaining about it a few years ago. The number one refunder was a guy named Noir. He ran a refunding channel on Telegram, but he ran a lot of different channels. He ran a refunding channel. He ran a marketplace where other criminals could come in and pay him a fee for advertising, and he would let them advertise their wares, products, and services on there. He ran a mentorship channel where you could pay him $2,500 and you could take classes under him. He ran an advanced replacement fraud channel. He ran a travel channel where you could go to someplace like Expedia, figure out the vacation that you wanted, send a snapshot over to him or one of his travel vendors, and they would charge you 40% of whatever Expedia had quoted. So he ran all these types of channels. He profited in excess of $7 million on Telegram. How do we know he profited $7 million? Because he said he did. How did he run his business? Well, he ran his business. He had employees. He had a director of marketing. He had a PR person. He had people that were running drop addresses that he was paying so much to run drop addresses so they could receive products from him, stolen products. He had people in the mentorship channel that were teachers that he would pay them to teach whatever program, whether it be credit repair or synthetic fraud or advanced replacement fraud or refunding fraud or blah, 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 all the way down, or OPSEC, how to make sure that you were never identified by law enforcement. All that was taught by Noir, and he had employees that did all of this stuff for him. So that's what Noir did. He was extremely successful. He ran it like a business, and it was a very profitable business. The reason I say is Noir disappeared, I guess about 2 weeks ago now. And I've been talking about it for a while. I've been given behind the scenes. We've been talking about it. I've been reaching out. Hey, what the hell happened to this guy? So the chatter is that, so Noir was in the UK, or is in the UK. The chatter is that Noir got his ass arrested. See, what was going on, other than running that, having all these employees and everything, Noir actually ran promotions. So he had a Mother's Day promotion where he would do free refunds for your mom. If you want to get a gift for your mama, I'll do a free refund for you. You just place the order and I'll get the money back. She can keep the item. I get the money back for you. It's all free. And I won't charge you anything for doing that. So he was doing that. He had free promotions all the time. So he was, at one point, he was the only guy that was able to hit Apple for X amount of dollars and get an instant refund. Well, instead of him profiting by that, he said, hey, anybody that wants to do a refund with Apple, and just so that we're on the same page, what refunding fraud is I'll use my name, my credit card, my address. I'll order a laptop or I'll order an item. I'll get it in, and there's a few things that can happen from that point. I can say I didn't get it. I can say I got the box, but it wasn't in the box, or I can tell Apple or whoever that I want to return the item. They will send me a return label, and then I can manipulate the return label to make it appear that I've sent the item back for a refund. The merchant thinks I've sent the item back. I get to keep the item, and I get my money back at the same time. If I'm not confident enough to do that, I'll pay a criminal like Noir to process that refund for me. They'll get the money back for me. I'll just pay them a percent of the order total, somewhere between 7 to 20%. That's a lot of money that a criminal can make simply by picking up the phone or getting on a chat session and say, I didn't get it, wasn't in the box, or deleting some stuff from the return label for you. Okay. So that's what happened. Noir makes $7 million doing that kind of bullshit. So Noir was running these promotions. And one of the promotions that he was running was this free refund type promotion where he said, hey, I'll do a refund for you for free. But in order to prove yourself, I want you to I'll give you a couple of items that I want you to buy. I'll get your money back to you, and that will allow you to get into the VIP channel where we're really making a lot of money. Okay, so what you did is you said you would contact Noir and say, hey, I want to be in the VIP section. Noir would give you 2 items, typically something like a Surface Pro or a Razer Razer gaming laptop. You would buy it and have it sent to a drop address that Noir supplied you. Once Noir received that, he would process the refund and get the money back for you, so you weren't out anything, and that would allow you to enter into the VIP section. The chatter is that what happened is Noir, on one of these promotions where he's doing this shit for free, it was a controlled delivery. So evidently, some cops somewhere decided, hey, tell him we want to enter into the VIP section. Yeah, tell him that. Get his address, and we'll go and we'll deliver the items that he wants. So they got his ass, or they got somebody that was connected to him, and he got popped. That's the chatter. Whether that's true or not, who knows, but it sounds reasonable, because what happens is Noir, so they said, according to the chatter, and I've talked to several people off-site about this, several criminals is who I've talked to that have some information, and you piece all the information together. So evidently, according to them, he was arrested. He is able to get his ass out within the next day, comes back on Telegram, shuts everything down. And he did come back on Telegram. He shuts everything down, and he makes one cryptic statement at the end. He says, hey, I won't be back. I want to thank everyone for engaging in this role-playing game that we've been doing. As we know, none of this has been real. That's his attempt to cover up all the criminal activity that he's been committing for the past 4 or 5 years. So that's what happened. And that's the chatter. Is it true or not? I think it's viable. Regardless, Noir is now offline. Now, the reason I bring up Noir in common sense, think about this shit for a second. You've got somebody on a channel advertising publicly that, hey, I will process refunds for you. I charge 7 to 15%. I've made $7 million off of that. I'm going to charge you $2,500 if you want to take a class. I've got a director of marketing. I've got a PR person. I've got employees that I'll hire. In fact, if you want to be an employee, send me your resume and I'll see about putting you on the payroll. And he was paying some of these guys $10, $15, $20,000 a month. Okay. So there were a lot of people making a lot of money. In fact, if you had signed on to Noir's service, he often had people vouch for him and post reviews. And some of the people who were working with Noir, doing refunding fraud with Noir, they were making, at the low end, they were making $20,000 a week. At the high end, they were defrauding single merchants for $130,000 plus in product every single week. All right. So there was a lot of money being stolen. Noir disappears. Now, the thing is that Noir was one of the foundational pieces of trust on Telegram. People trusted his channels. They knew that he was a criminal. They knew that he would do his best to take care of them to make sure they were not defrauded by the other scammers that were there. When Noir disappears, it created a vacuum of trust on Telegram, which is still trying to find its way right now. At the same time, because no one's really sure 100% what happened. It's going to take a few more months for all that shit to come out. Because of him disappearing, people are now paranoid. There was a guy at the beginning of the show, I said, that asked, how do you disrupt the trust mechanism that criminals use? This is one of these primary ways right here. You see someone that's being arrested, all the chatter starts to come. You get one person that's got one piece of the puzzle, another person's got another piece, and all these criminals are working together to find out what happened. All right. Matter of fact, one of the other big channels on Telegram right now is called AIO, All in One Crime, AIO Crime. Any chatter about Noir whatsoever that looks like it might be truthful, that individual is being banned, and the comments are being deleted from that channel. So there is certainly something that has went on. My opinion is that the guy probably has been picked up. From there, we see what the fallout is. Now, common sense. That's today's episode. Common sense. The thing is that we see a lot of public comments from criminals online. You see, or on YouTube, or on Facebook, you'll see some son of a bitch that will wave the bands of cash, or on TikTok, you see it. You see some son of a bitch that's committed some sort of fraud, and he takes pictures of the bands of cash that he's got, or the car that he's driving, or any number of bullshit like that. And sooner or later, his ass is caught, and he gets 15 to 20 behind bars someplace. That is not a common sense approach to committing crime. Bragging about the crimes that you are committing, the money that you are making, and the companies that you are defrauding is not probably the best thing that you can do. So I guess we could call this section of the show the Brett Johnson advice to criminals out there all over the place. If you will be to commit some crime out there, it's probably best that your ass ain't advertising it, that you ain't bragging about it, that you ain't telling them the addresses where they need to come and get you, Noir. Just want to throw that out there. You probably want to be as circumspect as you possibly can and lay as low as you possibly can. Of course, the problem with that, especially with online crime, the problem with that is if you're a vendor, you can't do that. If you're a vendor, you have to be as public and as high profile as you possibly can in order to make as much money as you possibly can. The problem with refunding fraud, and I want to be honest with you guys, because there's going to be a lot of people that are watching this that are refund fraudsters. The problem with refund fraud is that is bottom of the barrel. You've got absolutely no skill if you're doing refund fraud. It literally is calling up a company and telling them you didn't get the friggin' item, or it wasn't in the box, or you get the return label, and you already know what you got to take off of that return label to send it in, attached to a magazine, or make it go to another address, some empty box someplace, or whatever, attached to a magazine, or whatever the frig it is. That's not a skilled type of crime. Yet someone like Noir is coming up and saying that he is skilled. He's not. There's no skill involved to that. And the other criminals that are engaged in that, they just simply don't have the confidence level to do it themselves. So they're paying someone like Noir to do that easy ass shit that requires no skill anyway. They're paying him 7 to 20% to get those refunds. So there's no skill about that at all. And the reason I bring that up is without skill, at least some degree of skill in something, you are going to make stupid ass mistakes like Noir. You're not going to realize that, hey, you've talked way too friggin' much on these forums. You've shared way too much information. You've gotten a little too comfortable And OSINT's going to nail your ass at the end of the day. Not only that, but you've done a lot of stupid shit. You've given drop addresses. You've been paying people. How have you been paying them? Oh yeah, all that shit can be tracked. Even that blockchain shit, unless you're paying in Monero, that shit can be tracked. Yes, it can. Yes, it can. Yes, it can. So common sense has disappeared from a lot of criminal communities. In the real world too, as I've pointed out at the beginning of the show with all these damn things I've been talking about, but in the criminal communities, common sense has absolutely disappeared. Absolutely disappeared. Matter of fact, Noir, you want another example of how stupid his ass had gotten, and no wonder that he gets his ass arrested, but he had a travel vendor. He had a couple of travel vendors. All right. One of his travel vendors, their screen name was their actual real first name in real life. Think about that for a second. The dude didn't even try to hide what his real name was. He used his real first name as his screen name on Telegram. That's a lack of common sense. That screams to me that this must be your first day on the job as a fraudster. Usually if you've worked any more than a couple of weeks, you realize that maybe, just maybe, you need to be as anonymous as you possibly can. Yet this travel vendor had been around for months, for several months, using his real first name as his screen name. Not only that, but evidently there was a tiff between two different travel vendors, and they started to try to turn each other in, started to call the law enforcement on each other. And both of them evidently know who Noir possibly is. Of course they would, because Noir shared way too much friggin' information. So that's Noir. That's the story that's going on there. Just wanted to share that. And I also wanted to comment on, I mentioned before, travel and refunding. Turns out that a lot of the people that are committing refunding fraud, this really is their first day on the job. They think that they need some money. We live in a society these days where most of society, they won't, consider a budget. I have to have that new phone. If I can't afford it, how can I get it? So they'll defraud Samsung or Apple or what have you, doing some sort of refunding fraud. A lot of the times, because it is these, they've never committed fraud before, these people haven't, they'll go on to commit more and more fraud. But when it's really their first day on the job, when they're first getting started, they don't have the confidence needed to do it themselves. And that's where someone like Noir comes in. He says, hey, I can do this for you. Look at all these reviews that I've got, all the money I've gotten back for all these other people, how much they're profiting. And he layers it in even more by saying, look, and also no one is ever arrested. Law enforcement never comes knocking. They never come knocking at all. So you don't have to worry. No one's ever been prosecuted for refunding fraud. So someone that is of that mentality, of that generation where I've got to have it, and I'm not going to cut corners. I'm not just going to decide just not to get the phone. I got to have this new phone or laptop or PS5 or whatever the hell that is. Because of that, they lack the confidence to do it themselves. They pay Noir 7 to 15%. Now, guess what? Those first people that are doing that, they use their real name, they use their real address, and they use their real credit or debit card to place that order. Noir or whoever the refunding agent is, gets all of that real information. It is on their laptop. Now, do you think, and again, this is common sense, or this is, I'm actually talking about FIS, fucking idiot syndrome right now, because these people are really suffering from this. All right. So the criminal vendor gets all of the real information of that person engaging in that fraud. Do you think they delete that shit once they're through with that transaction? No, they don't. Let me tell you, no, they don't. Personal experience, anybody that's ever been arrested before, they get your laptop, all of that bullshit is right there. Every single bit. So if Noir has been arrested, think about that for a second. All those people who have dealt with him, they got all your real names, your addresses, credit card details, the order details, everything else. Don't know if he's been arrested or not. But when the time comes that when he actually is, there's going to be some knocks at the door. It gets worse than that. These people who are booking travel. So you go over to some travel site, whether it be Priceline, Expedia, whatsoever, you go over to one of these sites, and you load up $10,000 worth of travel and hotels and what have you. You then contact Noir on his, or one of his vendors on his travel channel, and you say, hey, this is a snapshot of every flight that I want, of the hotel I want to stay at, the length of time, everything else. So what do you have to do? You have to send them your real name, your date of birth, address, all this other bullshit. So they know exactly who you are, what seat you've sat in. They've got you on camera, everything else. This guy gets popped. Again, his travel guy, his screen name was his real first name in real life. Do you think that this idiot deleted any of those transactions where all these people, and I'm not talking about 2 or 3 people, I'm talking dozens to hundreds of people come in and book travel there? Do you think that he deleted any of those transactions, those real names, the orders, anything else? No. Common sense for criminals, common sense in a criminal world. That's what I'm talking about today. Again, refunding fraud, bottom of the barrel bullshit. If you're one of these guys that's doing refunding fraud and think you're doing something, you are not. You are completely unskilled. That's about as bottom of the barrel of a criminal activity as you can possibly do. All right. Got no respect for that, guys. None. Yes, I grant you're stealing some money. You're doing that. You profited all day, every day, because the merchants simply ain't doing shit right now. A lot of them aren't. But there's absolutely no skill at all involved in that crime. End of the day, we're going to wrap up this show. All right. End of the day, we're talking about, I guess one of the things we should approach is, why is cybercrime successful? One is the numbers of criminals that keep coming in. When I ended Shadow Crew, when the federal government ended Shadow Crew, October 26th of 2004, we ended with 4,000 members. Fast forward to 2017, the largest criminal network on the planet, Alphabet. Government shuts them down, 240,000 members. Fast forward 2 more years, 2019, a dark web marketplace called Black Market gets shut down, 1.15 million members. All of that is pre-pandemic. During the pandemic, governments institute stimulus programs with absolutely no security in place for 6 months. In fact, they took away the security that was in place. That CARES Act took away the security that was in place. So for 6 months, any fraudster that wanted to was able to come in and profit as much as they possibly could for 6 months. As a result, fraudsters, the numbers blew through the roof. Now the stimulus programs are over. Those fraudsters that came in during that time, they ain't going to go get a job. They ain't going to enroll their asses in school because they've already had a taste of the profit potential in fraud. So they're going to pivot someplace else. They're going to go back to credit card fraud, advanced replacement fraud, refunding fraud, synthetic fraud, new account fraud, all these other avenues that saw a downtick in fraud during the stimulus, during the pandemic, because all the criminals had went over there. Yeah, all these other verticals and companies that were saying, oh, we're not seeing as much fraud. Oh, man, you're going to get eaten alive right now. We're already seeing that, as a matter of fact. We're already seeing that. So that's one of the reasons that cybercrime continues to succeed, is you've got so many people. You've got an economy right now that is crashing. Joe Biden comes out and says, oh, it's not a definite. It is not a definite that we are going to go into a recession. Well, dude, I hate to tell you, you are completely disconnected from reality. I think our asses are already there, and it's going to be one hell of a recession. Because of that, you're going to have people that are not able to pay their bills, or they're scared of making the mortgage payment. You've also got this mentality, this entitled mentality of a lot of people saying, hey, I have to have that phone. I have to have that PlayStation 5. And because of that, where they can't pay for it legally, guess what? You're going to see these people who usually not commit fraud going into that criminal environment. You absolutely are going to see that. All right. So that's another reason. I went to RSA. I told you I went to RSA and I was going to comment on that. I went to RSA. You want to know why cybercrime succeeds? I hit the vendor floor and I immediately start hearing lies. I was on the vendor floor. Now so RSA is one of the biggest security conferences on the planet. One of the biggest security conferences on the planet is in San Francisco at the Moscone Center. I hit the floor. I saw rappers. I saw one DeLorean dressed up like the Back to the Future car. I saw at least one Formula One race car. The full race car was there. I saw a few robots. I saw some big ass anime type statues, and I heard a lot of lies. I heard a lot of vendors out there that were screaming about how, you know, these attackers, they started out as, you know, these big fat people in their mom's basements. I literally heard one vendor saying this stuff. You know, it used to be the cybercrime was these people in their mother's basements committed crime, and then ransomware comes around, and we get the dark economy because of ransomware. And I sat there, and I stood there for a couple of seconds, and it got me so bad because I had told my wife, I was like, what I'll do is I'll go through the floor, and I'll hit all the vendors, and I'll get us a big collection of T-shirts, and all the kids can wear the T-shirts around, you know, doing the workouts or whatever they're going to do. Well, at least we'll come back with some groovy T-shirts. I didn't come back with any T-shirts because I was absolutely disgusted by what I saw and heard. Why does cybercrime succeed? Well, because you don't have to. This painting the picture of cyber criminals as these upper tier computer hackers is completely inaccurate. We've got over 7,500 security companies out there. We've got the media as well, that they're very good about painting cyber criminals as untouchable, as ghosts, as operating in the shadows and no one can catch them, as computer geniuses that no one can compare to. That is simply not true. It is not true. 90% of every single attack uses a known exploit. It's not zero-day attacks. It's not hackers. It's cyber criminals. It's social engineers that are hitting you. It's a criminal type of platform or service that is refined enough that it's separated into the sellers of the product, services and PII, the criminals who are committing those specific types of crimes using those products, services, and PII, and then the money mules that are cashing that shit out. That's the way this stuff works. And that's been going on for years. It's not like that one company that said, oh, yeah, it started out in the mom's basement. And only since about 2018, 2019, have we seen the dark economy. You, sir, are a liar. Not going to mention company names, but you got to be honest. You don't have to lie to people to sell them a product. You can tell them the truth, because when we start telling the truth, we can take a truthful approach to things and try to combat the problems that are out there. Just tell the damn truth. So I was kind of disgusted. Needless to say, now it's not everybody that was RSA. There were some companies that they had an outstanding product. And I stopped by and I talked to some of those guys, and I had a very enjoyable conversation with them because they knew what they were talking about. They were not trying to lie to potential clients or try to sell a product just by scaring somebody. They were doing an outstanding job. But there were a lot of vendors out there that were trying to distract an audience, were trying to lie, scare them into reacting. And that's the wrong way to go, because that's the way criminals work, right? Criminals work by making sure that you dismiss reason and logic and react in a knee-jerk reaction. So if you're hearing some salesman out there saying, hey, you got to worry about these attackers. You got to worry about them. They'll eat you alive. Ain't nobody else can catch them. They're so sophisticated. They're all hackers. They're all hackers. They going to get you. Unless you sign our product, they going to get you. That's cybersecurity pillow talk. And that's the kind of stuff we do not need. Why does cybercrime succeed? Let me put things into perspective for you. We've got 37,000 FBI field agents across 56 field offices in the United States. Now, how many of those 37,000 FBI agents are concentrated on cybercrime? Take a guess. 37,000 overall agents. Only a couple of hundred are concentrated on cybercrime. And of those couple of hundred, a lot of them are worried about nation state attacks. They're not worried about the normal fraudster that's out of there. So you're dealing with millions of fraudsters sometimes on some of these channels and platforms versus just a few hundred FBI agents. Secret Service is the same damn thing, trying to combat that problem. We're way past this idea of being able to arrest our way out of that type of situation. And it's like that worldwide. At the same time, you've got jurisdictional problems. You've got the thing where a criminal is in a country that does not extradite or will not share information with law enforcement, or the criminal's there, but he's committing the crime in the United States or where have you. So you've got these jurisdictional issues. Who do you report to? You've got these stats that I talk about all the time. 90% of every single cyber attack uses known exploits. 41% of every single router on the planet uses the default password. That doesn't include the billions of IoT devices out there that have hard-coded passwords or default passwords that have not been changed. And you can look all that shit up on Google about what the password should be. 80% of every single person on the planet uses the same or a similar login and password across multiple websites. 86% of spear phishing attacks are successful. So that, you want to know why cybercrime succeeds? Start looking at shit like that. You've got the apathy of the victims or the potential victims that are out there. You know, there's a reason that the biggest group of victims demographically of cybercrime, a lot of people think it's senior citizens. Actually, that's the second biggest group. The biggest group are the millennials. Why? Well, because they've got a lot of damn apathy. They've been told over and over again, you're not safe. You can't do anything about it. They're going to get you. They're going to get you. And they've heard about breach upon breach about breach until they get to the point where they're desensitized to it and they've got an apathy about it. And that just opens the channel, the threat platform up even bigger so they can be victimized even more at that point. So you've got that. You've got the platforms and channels and apps that are out there, not just that idea that I talked about where the definition of dark web has changed. It has. So you've got Discord, you've got Telegram, you've got Wicker, you've got WhatsApp, you've got Tor, you've got all these, you've got Facebook groups, Reddit, all these other things where criminals come in and communicate. So that helps cybercrime succeed. And I'm not calling those channels criminal. I'll call Telegram criminal. I think its ass needs to get shut down in the United States, or it needs to answer to U.S. courts. But a lot of these channels are legal services that criminals just co-opt to commit crime. That's another reason that cybercrime succeeds. It's also this thing where only recently have the good guys started to understand that cybersecurity, fraud, and identity all work together. Criminals have understood that for a long friggin' time. They have, but only recently have the good guys started to understand, you know, really, it's more than just fraud. Fraud and cybersecurity, they go hand in hand. And then, oh, you know, really, it's more than just fraud and cybersecurity. Fraud, cybersecurity, and identity, they all work together. Criminals have known that shit for a long time. We've got to get better at understanding that. End of the day, we just got to be truthful. We just got to be truthful. We got to tell the truth about who the attackers are. We got to be able to speak out and tell the truth about what's happening without worrying about these damn consequences. It's more than just making money. It's more than that. It's if we can't get past this idea that, hey, we can't talk about this because, you know, somebody may hear us or we may lose our job or what have you, we're never going to defeat this problem. We've got to get better at sharing information. We've got to get better at telling the truth and speaking the truth. And we can't be afraid to speak out anymore. I'm Brett Johnson. This is the Brett Johnson Show. I want to thank you guys for listening. What do we say? We say stay safe, stay secure, stay vigilant. More importantly, this is the Brett Johnson Show. At the end of the day, just do the right damn thing. I'm Brett Johnson. Thank you for listening. Until next time.